His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. Okay, Ramayana. Do you two girls know something about Ramayana? Not much? A little bit? A lot?
Well, we watched like a TV show about it.
Oh, okay, a TV show.
Yeah, but it was quite original.
It was?
Yeah.
How old? Cartoon or people?
Like actual people.
Actual people?
Yeah, it showed the story of Ram.
How many episodes?
A lot. Like
10, 15, 20?
100.
100?
Yeah.
100?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite story from Ramayana?
I like when they were born. Like when they were
The whole story?
Yeah.
Rishishringa and the Yagya and all that?
like when like the fire thing.
The fire yagya.
Yeah.
And someone came out of the fire,
And
handed
then gave them the food.
payasam, the sweet rice, to Dasrath, who gave to his queens. That one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. How about you? You've watched the 100-part series of Ramayana also?
Yeah, my favorite part was I liked the part where they finished fighting and like they like won over like Lanka, and then they started going in, and Vibhishana was crowned the king. I like that part when everything is resolved, all the problems.
Oh, phew. And Sita went into the fire before that or after that?
Before that.
Before that. So the battle's over, everything becomes peaceful.
Yeah.
Vibhishan becomes the next king, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember all the names? Vibhishan, you know who the three brothers were? Ravana is the elder brother.
Yeah, there was Ravana, there was Vibhishana, and there was Kumbhakarna.
Kumbhakarna.
Yeah.
Kumbhakarna. And they had a sister.
Yeah.
Her name starts with an S.
Oh, yes, Suparnka.
Yeah, Suparnaka. Uh-huh. They had a big family though, because they had cousins, Kar and Dushan. Did you see that part? That battle? And,
Yeah.
okay. You don't like the battle scenes so much?
No.
No. Boys like the battle scenes. I've learned that. Boys like the battle scenes. What's your favorite part of the battle? Well, we're going this evening. We're going to be going from Siddha Ashram. Siddha Ashram is the place where Vishvamitra Muni kept his ashram, and Subahu was killed, and Maricha wasn't. Have you ever wondered? I've often wondered, and then we got the answer. Why did Ram not kill? He killed Subahu, but he didn't kill Maricha. Why? Why?
The Subahu, he was still being demonic, and he was still trying to ruin the puja, but Marichi figured out that it was wrong, and he didn't do it, and he surrendered to Ram.
But why he spared the life of Maricha? Because later he came back and caused a big problem, right?
Because Krishna always has mercy on his devotees and the people who surrender.
But Maricha wasn't a devotee. He was a bad guy.
But
He killed sages and ate them. He was a bad guy.
But then he became a good guy because.
Yeah, he did.
Was he son of Bhim? No, I'm mixing it up.
What he did when he became filled with fear. Okay, take the microphone back from her. Here's a lesson in rasa. You know what the meaning of rasa is? Both of you girls. Rasa, mellow or taste or sweetness, rasa. There's 5 primaries and there's 7 secondary. 5 plus 7 makes 12. So those persons who fix their mind upon the personality of Godhead, just by that one quality of fixing their mind upon the personality of Godhead, that entitles them to achieve the spiritual world, even if they're bad guys. Like, this is a lesson from Srimad Bhagavatam. You're familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam, right? A little bit? In the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a discussion between Maharaj Yudhisthira. It's right after the Rajasuya sacrifice, the big sacrifice, where Yudhisthira was established as the next king. Big event. Rajasuya Yajna. Right in the middle of that, Shishupal lost his head. Because 100 times he blasphemed Krishna with this part of his body. So that part of his body was separated from the rest with Krishna's Sudarshan Chakra. And they saw, right in the assembly, the soul of Shishupal went in the air, this spark, this brilliance, and then hovered for some time and then entered into Krishna's body. So 7th canto, chapter 1, there's a whole discussion about, wait a minute, how does Shishupal get liberation? He was a bad guy. He was like really offensive. Bad guy. But he got liberation, and many sages and yogis and tapasvis and people, they try for lifetimes, they don't get liberation. He got liberation. How'd that happen? And the answer is, you fix your mind upon the personality of Godhead. However, yena tena pakarena manat krishna deveshayat, you'll attain Krishna. It gives the example that, there's the lesser position of Shishupal and Kamsa. Kamsa was filled with fear. Maricha was filled with fear. The third time that Ravana came to Maricha's residence and said, I want to kidnap Sita and I want your help, he froze and panicked. No. You have no idea how powerful he is. And he tells the story of being shot by the arrow and being sent 800 miles. 800 miles. 800 miles. That's a lot. That's big. And right into the sea. And from there, Maricha went back to Lanka. He hung out with his friends in Lanka. And together they decided, let's do it again. They knew how to change their shapes. They assumed shapes of deer. And they went into the forests. They found sages acting like they're nice, cute deer. And then they attacked them and ate them. And that was their fun. Ram found out. Ram came, and there were 3 of them. He immediately left. Maricha ran in his deer body for his life. Ram didn't shoot me because he would never fire from behind, but the other 2, they were killed. You have no idea how powerful Ram is. Please, my advice is don't go after him. And whatever, you don't involve me. Ravana said, I was asking you nicely. Now I'll order you. You help me or I'll kill you. Maricha said, better to be killed by Ram than killed by you. So I'll help you. Because if I'm killed by Ram, I'll be thinking of Ram. His mind was absorbed in fear and thoughts of Ram. So he helped him. And by that, fixing your mind on the personality of Godhead, even out of fear, or like Shishupal did, out of scorn, he, bad attitude towards Ram, towards Krishna. But he achieved salvation. Kamsa achieved salvation out of fear. So, So we're at the part where Vishvamitra Muni has witnessed the purpose of Lord Ram's appearance. He knew, it's really nice, he knew that Ram was the personality of Godhead, and he also knew that Ram wanted to display affection for him as his teacher or guru. So he was feeling like parental affection, or a spiritual master to disciple kind of affection. At the same time, knowing the person he has affection for is Vishnu. Very interesting, very interesting. And so after those 2 were killed, the plan has been made. Let's go to a festival. There's a festival going on in Ayodhya, the kingdom of Janak, Videha. Let's go. And there's going to be a big bow festival. And whoever can string that bow gets Sita as his wife. At this time, Ram was 12. And Sita was something like 9. That comes out later when Sita tells to Ravan at Panchavati, what's your history? Who are you and who is your husband? She's quite young when she was married. So that's what we're going to read. And I think today is Tuesday, right? So on Thursday evening, I'm thinking, Thursday evening, 2 nights from now, I'm going to cover a section that we missed. Because this is a book by, it's really nicely written, Krishna Dharma Das, Prabhupada disciple in the UK, a really good writer. And so he's taking the Valmiki Ramayan that's this big and making it this big. So he leaves some things out. So one of the things he left out was the descent of the Ganges. Vishwamitra tells that they crossed the Ganges. He tells the whole story of the descent of the Ganges. So we're going to do that Thursday with pictures. I spent a lot of time today gathering images. It's a really nice story. And it's connected with the line of the Lord Ramachandra. Lord Ramachandra appeared in the line of Ikshvaku, who was the son of Vivaswan. And Vivasvata Manu, who was the son of Vivaswan. So it's in that same line. We'll hear that Thursday evening. If you're available, check it out. It's going to be with nice pictures and the whole thing. We don't have any actors on stage, but we'll have some nice images. Okay, so here's the trial of strength. This is stringing the bow. A beautiful sunrise over the river heralded the dawn. The sounds of birds and forest animals filled the air as the sages and the princes bathed in the river. After performing their morning rituals and prayers, the boys came before Vishwamitra. The sage pointed to the river and said, "Here we should cross this river and make our way northward toward the Ganges." The boys looked around and saw nearby a line of sages holding their water pots and staffs, wading through the water at some shallow point. Ram and Lakshman fastened their silk garments up around their waists and placed their bows across their shoulders. Then, with Vishwamitra going immediately before them, they followed the sages through the clear, cool water of the Sone. After some time, they sighted the Ganges, shining in the late afternoon sun, appearing in the distance like a line of gold running across the landscape. Upon reaching the riverbank, they broke their journey and prepared to rest for the night. Now, in the appendix, there's the description of the descent of the Ganges. He put it at the end, not here. If there's time, maybe I'll just read that. It's nice. It's not too long. Upon reaching the riverbank, they took rest for the night. After worshipping the river with libations of water and lighting the sacred fire, the boys sat before Vishwamitra and inquired, "O holy sage, we wish to hear the origin of this great river which arrives at the Himalayas from the heavens, flows across the earth, and, it is heard, courses even through hell itself. How has this river become so holy? And why does she spread her influence throughout all the 3 worlds?" Moved by this question, Vishwamitra called to mind the glories of the Ganges and began to speak. I'm going to read it. It makes reference, appendix number 1. It's short. Appendices. In the far north, there stands the Himalaya, king of the mountains, whose presiding deity is known as Himavan. This Himavan, through his consort Mena, the daughter of the celestial Mount Meru, begot 2 charming daughters, both matchless in beauty. The elder of the 2 daughters was named Ganga, and upon the supplication of the gods, she later became this holy river. The other girl was named Uma, and her father conferred upon her the unlimitedly powerful Shiva to be his wife. After marrying that girl, who is also known in this world as Parvati, Shiva sported with her in regions of celestial bliss. Becoming concerned, the gods, with Brahma at their head, went before Shiva. They fell prostrate before him and said to him, O Lord, the world will not be able to bear your seed should it be released into Uma. The combined power of you and your consort will surely be unbearable to all beings. Please, therefore, retain your vital energy within your supremely splendid self. You will thereby preserve the world from being burned by the brilliance of your progeny. Shiva, who always remained fixed in thought of Vishnu and is ever compassionate to all beings, replied, It shall be as you say, for the words of the gods can never be denied, but my vital seed already stands dislodged from my heart. Where then shall it fall? Brahma replied, Your seed should fall upon earth, for she alone is capable of withstanding its power, bearing as she does the weight of all creatures. Shiva let fall his seed, which covered the whole globe. Brahma instructed Agni, the god of fire, accompanied by Vayu, move quickly across the surface of the earth and suck up Shiva's mighty seed. Previously, the gods had asked me that I provide them with a powerful commander for their army. Cause Shiva's seed to be born by Ganga, so that she may bring forth a blazing sun who will become the general of the gods. Agni at once caught up all of Shiva's vital fluid and went before Ganga, saying, Be pleased to receive Shiva's seed, O goddess. Ganga assumed an ethereal human form of exceptionally exquisite beauty. Upon seeing this form, Shiva's seed melted, and the god of fire impregnated Ganga all over with that glowing fluid. Burning with Shiva's fiery seed coursing through her veins, goddess Ganga said to Agni, O shining one, I cannot bear this flaming seed, which has been made even more powerful by your touch. Agni told her to discharge the seed upon the Himalayas, and Ganga immediately expelled it from her body. It emerged from her in a brilliant stream and fell upon the earth, forming vast veins of gold and silver. Even at a great distance, mines of copper, lead, and tin were created by that divine fluid. In the exact spot where Shiva's vital seed landed, there grew up a thicket of brilliant white reeds. The union of Ganga with the seed of Shiva conceived a child who was born from those reeds. He has become known in all the worlds as Skanda. Indeed, he is the powerful general of the gods, also famous as Kartikeya, for he was raised by the 6 goddesses known as Kritikas. Even now, that god can be seen in the sky, shining amidst the constellation of Kritika. After Kartikeya's birth, the gods approached Shiva's consort and, pleased in mind, worshipped her. However, she felt angry at having been denied union with her consort and with bloodshot eyes he pronounced a curse upon both the gods and the earth. As I was denied my desire of getting a son, so too shall all you gods remain issueless. The earth shall have a jagged surface of many shapes and forms, and shall have many masters. She shall never enjoy the delight of having a son, since she has deprived me of my own child. Sometime after this, a king named Sagara ruled over Ayodhya. Same place Ram comes from, right? Ayodhya. Sagara, predecessor king. From out of his 2 wives, the king had 60,001 sons. By the god's arrangement, one wife gave birth to a fetus shaped like a gourd, which then split into 60,000 pieces. These pieces were placed in 60,000 pots of ghee, and gradually they grew into babies. The other wife gave birth to a boy in a normal way. The 60,000 sons were of wicked conduct and caused pain to all living beings. The one son, however, was pious and became the beloved of all the people. There's lots of details being left out. One day, King Sagara performed a horse sacrifice for the good of the world. Upon seeing the sacrifice, Indra became concerned that Sagara may exceed him in pious merits and thereby take his post in heaven, which Indra himself had won by performance of pious acts of sacrifice. Indra thus assumed the form of a fierce Rakshasa and seized the sacrificial horse, taking it away to a distant place. King Sagara ordered his 60,000 sons to search out that horse. The princes traveled all over the earth but could not find the horse. They excavated the earth's surface and searched the subterranean region, but still to no avail. Excavating and looking in all directions, the princes created havoc and killed innumerable creatures. The gods went before Brahma and asked that he stop them. Brahma informed them that Mother Earth is always protected by the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who was at that time dwelling in Earth's subterranean region. Sagara's sons would soon be destroyed by that very Lord, who had assumed the form of a sage named Kapila. Kapila. Kapila? He taught Sankhya philosophy. Kapila was the son of Devahuti and Kashyapa. Devahuti Putra Kapila. He says, okay, off we go. In time, the princes arrived before Kapila and found him seated in meditation. The sacrificial horse was grazing nearby, left there by Indra. It was sneaky, he did it on purpose. Becoming furious, they thought Kapila was the thief. "Oh, evil-minded one, you have stolen this horse. We shall now kill you and take it back." 60,000 men started to attack Kapila, big mistake. Hearing this threat and seeing before him the 60,000 sons of Sagara, Kapila, a sage of immeasurable power, became angry. Due to their offense in having assailed the divine Kapila, all the princes were immediately burned to ashes by a fire which emanated from their own bodies. Now sometimes you see pictures of this, and it looks like fire comes out of Kapila's eyes, but the Bhagavatam makes it very clear. He didn't retaliate. They were burned by their own sin. It was such a sinful act. Fire came from their bodies and they were burnt to ashes. After some time, King Sagara became concerned about his sons. He ordered his one remaining son, Ansuman, to go after them. Ansuman also found Kapila sitting in meditation and saw before him his brother's ashes. Now, the Bhagavatam has a slightly different version. The one son, because there were two queens, one son had 60,000, the other son had one. And his name was Anshuman, but Anshuman was the son of his son. So it's another generation. Anshuman came before Kapila and saw before him his brother's ashes, his uncles, destroyed by their offense against the sage. Grieved by his brother's death, Anshuman looked all around and saw Garuda, Vishnu's great eagle carrier, who had come to serve his master. His master is Kapila, form of Vishnu. Garuda told Anshuman that he should derive some plan to bring Ganges to earth so that her waters could flow across his brother's ashes and thus liberate them from hell. Anshuman offered prayers to Kapila and received from him the horse, whereupon he went back to his father. The Bhagavatam version is, he very politely approached Kapila and said, "Is that the sacrificial horse?" He said, "Sure, you can have the horse. And those ashes over there, that's my brothers or my uncles?" He said, "Yes, but because of their great sin, there's only one thing." It's Kapila told them. In Valmiki Ramayan, Garuda told him, "Bring Ganges down." Anshuman went back with the horse. Despite every attempt to perform sacrifice and pray to the gods, neither Sagar nor his son were able to cause the Ganges to flow across the earth. It was several generations later that the famous king Bhagirath finally succeeded. By dint of his great asceticism, he pleased Brahma, who ordered Ganges to fall to earth. The river Ganges, known in heaven as the Mandakini, emanated originally from Vishnu's foot. How'd that happen? Another form of the Lord named Vamana, right? Vamana, the dwarf Brahman? Vamana? Yes? Vamana. Short dwarf, 3 paces of land, Bali Maharaj. With the second pace, he pierced the covering of the universe. And the waters of the causal ocean came through into the universe and descended down. There's some details. It eventually ended up in the heavenly region. Here's a little bit of Vedic cosmology. You like science? You like science? Science. The Vedic picture of the universe goes like this. There's like a coconut has a hard covering and there's hollow inside. And inside the coconut is water, coconut water. The universe is like that. There's 7 coverings and inside is a hollow part. And the bottom half of the universe is Garbhodak ocean, Garbhodak Shai Vishnu. He rests on the Garbhodak ocean. And then from his navel comes a lotus. And on top of the lotus is Brahma. So there's, within that stem of the lotus, there's the planetary systems. And there's 7 upper and 7 lower. That makes 14. And so Brahma is the very, very top. And the 7 lower planetary regions are below that. And where Kapila Dev was below that. So, you know the story of Dhruva? Dhruva Maharaj underwent austerities and he ruled his father's kingdom for some time. Then he went to a place called Dhruva Loka. Right? Dhruva Loka? You know where Dhruva Loka is in the universe? It's above the heavenly region and below the other 4 planetary regions above that. What does that mean? Here's the earth, Bhu, Bhuvar Loka, and Svarga Loka. Svarga is heaven, right? Svarga Loka, Svarga, heaven. So it's the topmost region of Svarga, is where Dhruva's planet is. So when the Ganges water, the celestial water, falls down, it falls first on Dhruvaloka. And then there's rivers from Dhruvaloka that are distributed to different parts of the universe. To cleanse the universe by that descent of the Ganges. And when it rests in the heavenly region, it's called the Mandakini. So now Brahma at the top told Ganges, you descend. So she's ready to do what he said. But she had some conditions. We're going to hear what those conditions are. Where are we? The river Ganges, known in heaven as the Mandakini, emanated originally from Vishnu's foot. When he kicked a small hole in the shell of the universe, the waters of the causal ocean, in which all the innumerable universes float, entered. Falling down to the heavens, the water was entered by the goddess Ganga, who then, on Brahma's order, brought it down to earth. This water filled the huge excavation made by Sagara's sons, and thereby became the great ocean. When Ram wanted to cross over, Vibhishan surrendered. He asked Vibhishan how to get to Lanka. Vibhishan said, the ocean personified is very indebted to your ancestors, the Sagaras, the sons of Sagara. They dug up the earth so badly when Ganga came down and filled up the ocean. So the Lord of the ocean, Samudra, is the Lord of the ocean. He'll surely help you. He's indebted to you and your ancestors. So Ram wanted Samudra to come, but he didn't come. And eventually he came because he saw, I better help him because I'll be in trouble if I don't. So Sagara's sons dug up the earth so badly that it created a big cavern in the earth, and that's what the oceans filled up as the Ganges descended. This water filled the huge excavation made by Sagara's sons and thereby became the great ocean. It flowed down to the subterranean region where it liberated the 60,000 princesses by covering their ashes. It is that same sacred river, made holy by the touch of Vishnu's foot, which you now see before you, O valiant princes. To this very day, anyone whose ashes are placed in this river is immediately liberated. So you know what to do if you have a cremation, you have your ashes put in the Ganges. So now we're going back to heading across the Ganges, and he tells the whole story. But we're going to do it more completely on Thursday evening. Yeah. In flowing and beautiful Sanskrit, Vishwamitra narrated at length the history of the sacred river. When he was finished, the princes were wonderstruck. Asking the sage again and again to continue speaking, the brothers listened all night as Vishwamitra recounted various other stories of the gods and demons. The following morning, they went towards the northeast, heading for Mithila. Mithila is the name of the capital of the kingdom of Videha. Gradually, the forest paths gave way to roads laid with stone that led to the city. The forest opened to fields of crops. As they came closer to Mithila, they saw well-planned gardens and groves with seats and fountains. The sounds of wild animals were replaced with the clamor of people in the city. Shouts of children and the rumbling of horse-drawn chariots greeted them as they entered the gates of Mithila. Huge elephants swayed along majestically, with smiling people waving from the howdahs on their backs. What's a howdah? H-O-W-D-A-H. Something on their backs. We'll look it up. Gazing about them, the travelers saw the golden domes of innumerable temples, along with many mansions of brilliant white stone. Along the roadside were shops displaying countless varieties of fruits, vegetables, and all kinds of sweetmeats. Other vendors displayed rows of shining gems, looking like numbers of rainbows. Everyone called out respectful greetings as the party moved slowly past. So the party means headed by Vishwamitra and Ram and Lakshman. They were in the front. There's a whole entourage of bullock carts and rishis chanting their mantras, and it must have been quite a sight for the city of Mithila. As they went along the wide, smooth road, they were met by the king's ministers, who had already been informed of their arrival. Headed by Vishwamitra and the princes, the party was led along the main highway to Janaka's palace. People thronged the sides of the road to gaze upon the famous sage and his two illustrious charges. As they looked upon the powerful princes, some of them guessed that they might be the sons of Emperor Dasarath. The people wondered what had brought the princes to Mithila. Were they going to attempt to string the king's great bow? As Ram smiled at the people that were filled with a desire to see this handsome, powerful prince win Sita's hand, Janaka personally came out to greet them, accompanied by his priests and counselors. He immediately fell at Vishwamitra's feet and had him brought into the palace, where he offered him and the two princes golden seats. The king had water fetched for washing their feet and personally performed the ceremony. Once the formalities were complete, a meal was offered to the sage and the princes. As they sat on the floor on silk rugs, ivory tables were placed in front of them. Gold and silver dishes were fetched containing choice foods of every description. They ate heartily, and when they were finished, Janaka said to Vishwamitra, "Great indeed is my good fortune today, for I see before me your holy self. I am blessed by your presence. Tell me, who are these two boys accompanying you? They appear like two powerful tigers, and they rival the gods in beauty and grace. What brings you here to my house, along with these boys equipped with weapons?" The king had waited until the travelers were rested and refreshed before making his inquiries. Vishwamitra told him about the boys and how they had disposed of the Rakshasas in the forest. They had come now to see the famous bow. Janaka was thrilled to hear that they were princes from Ayodhya. Nothing could be better than aligned with Dasarath's line. If only Ram could pass the test of the bow. At that point, Satyananda, Janaka's head priest, spoke to the princes. After welcoming them, he began to narrate the history of Vishwamitra. Satyananda was himself a great ascetic. Satyananda, by the way, is the son of Gautama and Ahalya. But he became the chief priest of Janaka. He knew Vishwamitra well, having previously spent time with him in his hermitage. Seeing the famous sage again, Satyananda felt inspired by affection to speak of his glories. Looking upon the beautiful faces of Ram and Lakshman, who sat enraptured by his speech, the priest told the story of Vishwamitra, who had performed difficult asceticism for thousands of years. And that's a really long story. It's in the appendix. We're not going to hear it too long. He told them how the sage had once been a great king, and after practicing tremendous austerities, had been blessed by Brahma to become a powerful rishi. When Satyananda finished his astonishing tale, everyone gazed with awe at Vishwamitra, who sat flanked by the princes, his mind absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Lord. Janaka approached the effulgent rishi and spoke to him with joined palms. "I stand blessed by your appearance, O holy sage. This account of your many glories has filled my mind with wonder. Indeed, I could go on hearing it again and again, but dusk has now fallen, and I beg your leave. Let us meet again in the morning, and it will be my great delight to satisfy your every desire. Janaka, along with his ministers and priests, circumambulated Vishwamitra in respect, and then departed. After performing their evening rituals and prayers, Vishwamitra and the princes rested for the night in the king's palace. The following morning, Janaka again came before Vishwamitra. He bowed low before the sage and touched his feet, asking in a pleasing voice, "Please instruct me what I should do for you today, O sinless one. You are worthy of, in every way, of receiving my service." Hearing these words from the virtuous and gentle king, Vishwamitra asked that they now be shown the bow. Janaka assented, but before taking them to see the bow, he described its history. Long before, in a former age, the bow had belonged to Shiva. That deity had become angry with the other gods when they had denied him a share of the sacrificial offerings made by the sages. Shiva had threatened them with the bow, saying, "I shall now sever your worshipable heads from your bodies. Stand ready on the battlefield if you have any valor." But the gods relented and quickly worshipped the infuriated Shiva. They had managed to appease him, whereupon he gave the bow to them. The famous bow was then given by the gods to Janaka's ancestor, Devarata. And after he fought for them in a battle with the demons, it had since been kept in the king's family, being worshipped as if it were Shiva himself. Janaka continued speaking to the sage and princes, who listened with great curiosity. "Once, I was performing a sacrifice to please the gods in order to get a worthy successor in my line. As the sacrificial ground was being prepared with a golden plowshare, a wonderful child appeared from out of the earth itself. This female child, who became known by the name Sita, grew up in my palace as my daughter. Her beauty is matchless. I have raised her with love and will give her in marriage to whoever can show exceptional prowess. Various rulers and princes have approached me and sued for her hand. Seeing these kings, I set a standard for winning Sita, saying, whoever can hold and string the mighty bow of Shiva will win this princess. Many proud kings thought they would easily bend the bow. However, coming before that bow, they were soon shorn of their valor and pride. They were hardly able to move the bow even slightly, far less lift and string it. Angry at their failure, numerous kings together besieged Mithila for 1 full year. When my resources were exhausted, I prayed to the god for support. I then received from them a vast army, equipped with every kind of weapon. That celestial army quickly dispersed those bellicose kings in all directions. Thus this bow remains here, unconquered, and awaiting some truly powerful king. There are some details. It's really nice. One of his thoughts were, Janak, Sita should marry somebody that's more powerful than her. And when she was a little girl, there were many situations where she easily lifted the bow. You want to hear those stories? They're quick. One of them was they were bouncing a ball with her girlfriends out in the park. And the ball bounced and went to where the bow was. And in the case where the bow was. So she lifted up the bow to find the ball. Put it back. Then there's another version of Ramayana that says the king wanted to teach his daughter to be humble. So he would give her some cleaning duties. And one of the areas that she had to clean was the area where the bow was kept. So she would regularly lift the bow, clean everything thoroughly, put it back in place. And there was another thing. Something got caught in the top of a tree, and they couldn't reach the thing that was caught in the top of the tree. So she got an idea. She got the bow and released the thing for the top of the tree and put it back. And so I can't have my daughter marry somebody that's weaker than her. She has to look up to her husband. He has to have valor and strength. There was other explanations. Those are some nice ones. Janaka looked at the two royal brothers. Ram's fame had reached him, and he felt sure the prince would win his daughter's hand. As the king beheld Ram's beautiful features, his powerful physique and noble bearing, he longed for the prince to pass the test and become his son-in-law. He stood before Vishwamitra with folded palms. "Come now, O sage, and bring these boys with you. If any can string the bow, then the hand of the divinely born Sita will be won." Janaka led them to the part of his great palace where the bow was kept. It was stored in an iron chest, which was adorned with gold engravings and covered over with numerous flower garlands. 300 powerfully built men somehow managed to move the chest to the center of the hall where it lay. Janaka turned towards Ram. "Here is the wonderful celestial bow." Took 300 men to. It had wheels on this iron cart. 300 men just to move the cart. He's a 12-year-old boy. It had been worshipped, kept and worshipped by the Janakas for many generations. Now the term by the Janakas, he was King Janaka, but the generations of kings that he was in were called Janakas. So I was confused because there's descendant, they're also called Janaka. Which Janaka? It's just, they're all Janakas. Plural. Not even the gods, demons, yakshas, Gandharvas, or Kundas can string it. How then can an ordinary man gaze upon this bow now, O Ram? Janaka ordered that the chest be opened. As the lid was lifted, the brilliant bow was revealed. It spread a golden glow all around. Consecrated of pure horn, it was skillfully worked with gold and silver images of the pastimes of the gods. Hundreds of golden bells and ornaments hung from the bow, which was studded with diamonds and other gems. Seeing the bow, the two princes gasped in appreciation. Ram bowed down in respect and then walked slowly around it. He looked towards Vishwamitra, who nodded slightly. Understanding Vishwamitra's indication, Ram stood with joined palms at the bow's center. He turned to Janaka. "I wish to attempt your test. I shall now try to lift this heavenly bow to gauge its weight and strength." While being extolled by Vishwamitra and other sages who uttered "Victory, victory!" Ram placed his hand under the bow. There was complete silence in the hall. Janaka held his breath as Ram stood motionless. Vishwamitra, knowing the extent of Ram's power, smiled slightly. In the balcony of the hall stood Sita. She looked at Ram, feeling natural attraction for the prince. Until then, she had never been interested in any of her suitors, although the most powerful king from all around the world had come there. To the gentle Sita, they were all arrogant and overly proud of themselves. Sita was deeply religious. All her life she had prayed that Vishnu might become her husband. She watched Ram approach the bow, and she felt her love for the Lord being awakened. Was this Vishnu himself? Becoming absorbed in her loving sentiments, Sita felt anxiety. Would Ram string the bow and become her husband? She held the matrimonial garland with trembling hands. Suddenly, Ram seized the bow by its middle part and raised it high above his head. A gasp of astonishment filled the hall. It was inconceivable. Ram tossed the bow slightly to gauge its weight. Placing one end of the celestial bow on the ground, Ram then moved to the other end and strung it. He pulled the string and bent the bow round in a semicircle. It broke suddenly, and a sound like a crash of thunder reverberated all around the hall. The earth shook as if there was an earthquake. Everyone was stunned and rendered senseless for some moments. Janaka was amazed. He turned to Vishwamitra. "I've now witnessed Ram's strength. His achievement is incredible. Having secured Ram as her husband, Sita will bring undying fame to my family." Janaka's eyes were filled with tears. Surely Ram was a divine personality. There could be no doubt. Till then, no king had been able to move the bow, even slightly. Some could hardly even look upon it, but Ram and handled as if it was a piece of bamboo. The king looked upon Sita in the balcony. She was filled with delight upon seeing Ram's feet, and her breast heaved with excitement. Awaiting her father's indication to come down, she stood, surrounded by her many female attendants. Janaka turned to speak to Ram, who stood peacefully, having replaced the broken bow in his chest. I shall now fulfill my pledge to give Sita's hand to whoever could string this bow. Sita is dearer to me than my own life, but I gladly offer her to you. Sita came down from the balcony with a garland of golden flowers in her hands and stood by her father. She was resplendent in a silk sari of deep maroon, a necklace of pearls shining on her breast. As she walked, her golden anklets tinkled and her diamond earrings swung to and fro. Smiling gently, she shyly lifted her eyes a little and looked at Ram, who caught her glance. Both felt their hearts moved by love. In that moment, their union was forged. Sita's father signaled, and she went before Ram. She placed a garland around his neck, indicating her acceptance of him as her husband. She blushed slightly and kept her eyes down. Walking slowly, she went back to her father, who felt as if his heart might burst with happiness. The king wanted to perform the marriage ceremony as soon as possible. He asked for Vishwamitra's permission, and when the sage agreed, the king arranged for swift messengers to go to Ayodhya to inform Dasarath. The ministers of Janaka left immediately and arrived at Ayodhya after 3 days. It took them many days to get to Mithila, but they had a shortcut. Anyway, they quickly went to the palace and were ushered into the presence of Dasarath, who appeared to them like a powerful god. Put at ease by the emperor's benign expression and gentle words of welcome, the ministers politely told them of the events in Mithila. The emperor was delighted to hear the submission of Janaka's envoys. Ram and Lakshman were well. They had conquered over the demons, and more than that, Ram had now won the beautiful Sita for his bride. Dasarath recalled how he had been contemplating this marriage, the marriage of his son, even as Vishwamitra arrived at his palace. The sage must have been sent by Providence, whose arrangement this union could surely have been made. After consulting with his counselors, Dasarath made up his mind to leave the next day for Mithila, taking with him his ministers, and preceded by a party of priests close behind. Dasarath went the next morning towards Mithila with his army marching close behind. They arrived after 5 days, a little slower. Dasarath approached Janaka, who graciously received the abundant riches brought as gifts. I mean, this is a whole section in Ramayana, the meeting of the two kings. But Janaka embraced the emperor, and the two old friends sat together discussing the wedding. Janaka told Dasarath how Sita had appeared from the earth. He also told him of a prophecy he had heard. What's that? Once the celestial seer Narada informed me that Sita is Vishnu's eternal consort, and that he would one day become her husband in this world. 2 + 2 = 4. Your son is Vishnu. He didn't say it, but 2 + 2 is 4. Because we discussed this yesterday evening. There are 2 places in Valmiki Ramayana where the indication... Now, I don't know if this is in Valmiki Ramayana, because in Valmiki Ramayana there's 2 places where Dasarath is informed of Ram's divinity. One is by Parshuram. When Parshuram gives him Vishnu's bow and Ram strings it, he says, "You're Vishnu. You are the killer of the Madhu demon. You're the lord of all the gods." Dasarath heard it. And Vashishta heard it, and the other sages heard it. There's only one other place. This is not part of Valmiki Ramayana, I assume. It's because what Krishna Dharma has done is he's primarily relying on Valmiki Ramayana, but he takes things from some other places to make the narration go smoothly and swiftly. This is not in Valmiki Ramayana. I'll check it out to see what's there. The celestial seer Narada informed me that Sita as Vishnu's eternal consort, and that he would one day become her husband in this world. I thus devised a test which would only be possible for Vishnu to pass. Your son has now passed that difficult test and must therefore be Sita's eternal husband. Dasharatha was again astonished to hear of Ram's divinity. I think that's not in Valmiki Ramayana again. He still found it hard to believe, having raised Ram as his child. He looked at his son, who stood before him modestly, bowed head and folded palms. Dasharatha was overpowered by love. His loving sentiments overcame any thoughts of Ram's divinity. The emperor looked again at Janaka and said, I approve this marriage in every way. Perform the ceremony under the guidance of learned brahmanas. O king, the success of a gift depends upon the way it is given. Therefore, be sure that all the necessary rites are properly observed without loss of time. Dasarath wanted to ensure that the marriage ceremony was performed carefully according to scriptural codes. He did not want any ill fortune created by neglect of sacred rituals. Such errors would blight the marriage and create future difficulties for the couple. Janaka issued instructions to his ministers and then sat with Dasarath in his great palace hall. Both of them listened to Vashishta recite Rama's family lineage. After hearing of Rama's ancestry, beginning with the sun god, Janaka recited Sita's genealogy, describing his own ancestry, which began with Rama. When Janaka finished, Vishwamitra spoke. He suggested that Sita's sister, what's Sita's sister's name? Starts with a U. Urmila. Urmila is to be married to Lakshman. Vishwamitra suggested that Sita's sister Urmila wed Ram's brother Lakshman. The sage also advised that Janaka's brother, Kushadwaj, allow his two daughters to marry Bharata and Shatrughna. Then there could be one ceremony for all four marriages. Pretty expedient. Big festival. Rising from his seat with joy, Janaka said, let it be so, again and again. He fell prostrate before Vishwamitra and said, I am ever your servant. Your words are worthy of my worship, and I stand commanded by you. Let the wedding take place tomorrow, a day marked by favorable stars. As the two kings sat together, the sun gradually set. Janaka took leave from Dasarath and departed for his personal quarters, flanked by his ministers and 100 warriors. Thousands of golden oil lamps lit up the hall as the crowds of Brahmins made their way out, all of them constantly uttering auspicious Vedic mantras. Now we're not going to, because I went and read this thing about the descent of the Ganges, I don't know if we have time to read about the wedding. What should I do? Should we stop there and do the wedding later? Or read about the wedding? It's 7:25.
It's up to you.
I'll leave it up to you two.
More or less.
Okay, you can listen to it.
Read it? Okay. I'll read fast. The following morning, Dasarath rose early and performed the first ritual for invoking good fortune. He had his 4 sons brought before him and then gave to the Brahmin priests 100,000 cows on behalf of each of them. The emperor also distributed gold and gems to the thousands of rishis assembled in Mithila to witness the wedding. The 4 princes shaved their heads and dressed in silk robes, putting on brilliant jeweled ornaments. Surrounded by the 4 handsome and effulgent youths, Dasarath shone like Brahma, surrounded by the celestial guardians of the 4 quarters. A great pavilion had been erected for the ceremony. Its walls were constructed of marble, and it was supported on numerous pillars studded with sparkling gems. Fragrant and brightly colored flower garlands were draped everywhere, and the air was filled with the scent of black aloe, incense. Large stands constructed of mahogany inlaid with coral and pearl, holding rows of golden seats surrounded the sacrificial area. Kings from all around the world, along with their ministers, filled the stands, eager to see the wedding. The entire pavilion was crowded with jubilant people who cried out, "All glories to Ram and Sita!" Hundreds of elderly Brahmins wearing simple loincloths with clean white threads hanging from their left shoulders were seated around the sacrificial arena. They recited Vedic hymns continuously, and the melodic rise and fall of the metric chanting filled the pavilion. Musical instruments played while expert singers sang the praises of Ram and Sita. The whole assembly appeared like an exuberant festival held in the heavens by the gods. Dasarath and his 4 sons approached the sacrificial fire, which was tended by Vashishta. When they were seated, the princes saw Sita and the other 3 princesses enter the arena. The princes' minds were captivated by the beauty of their wives-to-be. Adorned with shining silk garments, jewels, and golden ornaments, the princesses appeared like 4 goddesses descended from the celestial realm. They sat down opposite their intended spouses, glancing down shyly, and Vashishta immediately began the wedding ceremony. Janaka stepped forward, speaking in a voice choked with emotion. "My dear Ram, I now give to you Sita, my own beloved daughter, to be your assistant in all your religious duties. She will always remain exclusively devoted to you and will follow you like your own shadow. Take her hand in yours and accept her. I bless you both." Janaka took Ram's hand and placed it over Sita's. Vashishta sprinkled sanctified water over their clasped hands, signifying the confirmation of the gift of Sita. Holding Sita's hand, Ram led her slowly around the sacrificial fire. From the upper reaches of the pavilion, the gods were heard to exclaim, "Excellent! Bravo!" They probably didn't say bravo. They probably said something in Sanskrit. Celestial flowers rained down upon Ram and Sita. The entire assembly of onlookers erupted with a shout of joy. Both Dasarath and Janaka looked with tearful eyes at the newlywed couple. Ram's complexion, resembling a celestial emerald, contrasted the pure white features of Sita. They were both covered with golden flower petals, and their many jewels shone brightly. As they walked hand in hand around the fire, Sita looked down in shyness, while Ram smiled at the loudly cheering crowd in the pavilion. Each of Ram's 3 brothers, one after another, in order of their seniority, took the hand of one of the other 3 princesses. Lakshmana was united with Urmila, Bharata with Mandavi, and Shatrughna with Shrutakirti. The 3 effulgent princes, holding the bride's hands, their bride's hands, went around the sacrificial fire along with Janaka and the many sages. Cries of happiness filled the pavilion while the gods played their kettle celestial drums. Bevies of apsaras danced and Gandharvas sang. The sages recited Vedic texts, and the blast of conch shells was heard everywhere. All those present at the assembly were lost in ecstasy. The ceremony ended at midday, and the kings and princes gradually retired to their tents, headed by Dasarath, Janak, and the 4 newly married couples. The following day, Vishwamitra, after taking permission from both Dasarath and Janak, left for the northern Himalayan range, his mind intent on performing asceticism. Janaka bestowed upon his daughters a dowry consisting of hundreds of thousands of cows and an equal number of elephants, horses, chariots, and foot soldiers. The king, whose wealth was virtually unlimited, gave away millions of pieces of silken and cotton textiles, tens of thousands of hand-woven carpets, heaps of gold, silver, and jewels, and hundreds of richly adorned maids for each of the brides. A few days after, Dasarath left for Ayodhya, proceeding at the head of a large army. As the king, surrounded by his sons and the host of sages, was traveling along the broad road that led to Ayodhya, he suddenly saw a strange omen. Parshuram. Birds began to cry out fearfully and swoop down low over their heads. Witnessing this foreboding sign, Dasarath's heart quivered and his mind became fearful. The king asked Vishishta if he knew the cause of those omens. These signs portend some grave danger, replied the rishi. But here are groups of deer crossing our path from left to right. This indicates our deliverance from that danger. You should not fear. A fierce tempest blew up. The sun was enveloped in darkness, and the sky became black. Trees crashed to the ground, and the earth shook. A dreadful dust storm swirled around the travelers, confounding their senses. They were rendered virtually unconscious. Suddenly, from out of the darkness appeared the terrible sage Parshuram. He was dressed in tiger skins and had matted locks coiled at the crown of his head. Dasarath and his followers immediately recognized him. Although a Brahmin, Parshuram was famous for his prowess as a fighter. In former ages, he had single-handedly overcome the world's warriors, annihilating them by millions. The sage had become enraged when his father was killed by warrior kings, and he wreaked an awful vengeance. He had ranged the globe, massacring the entire warrior class. He now stood before Dasarath, holding a battle axe in one hand, and in the other a fierce arrow, which resembled a streak of lightning. He was as tall as two men, and he had upon his shoulder a great bow. Appearing as irresistible as the sun, as the fire of universal destruction, he blocked the path like an impassable mountain. As a detail, Dasarath had primarily 3 queens, but he had 350 other queens. And the story is that Parshuram would not attack a king if they were in the midst of a wedding. So each time Parshuram came around Ayodhya, he married another queen. 350 times. Now here he is standing right in the path. The sages in Dasarath's party quickly gathered together. They took water to wash Parshuram's feet and hands and offered him gentle words of welcome. Accepting the honor offered by the sages, Parshuram looked at Ram and said in a grave voice, "O Ram, I have heard of your strength. By breaking Shiva's bow, you have performed an incredible feat. How can I, who has formed a great enmity with all warriors, tolerate hearing of such prowess existing in a king? I have here another sacred bow, that of Vishnu. Let us see your power now. Fit this celestial arrow upon this bow and simply draw it to its full length. If you're able to accomplish this task, then I shall challenge you to single combat. When you stand in the battlefield and are swept away by the force of my weapons, you shall earn undying fame." Dasarath threw up his hands in horror. Knowing well of Parshuram's power, he feared for Ram's life. He approached the sage with joined palms and entreated him to spare Ram. Paying no heed at all to the king, Parshuram continued to speak only to Ram. "Both the bow broken by you and this one here were constructed by the architect of the gods Vishwakarma. The one you sundered, broke, formerly belonged to Shiva. However, this one was Vishnu's property. It is thus more powerful than the one you broke, for Vishnu is always Shiva's superior." Parshuram took the bow from his shoulder. With furrowed brows, he gazed at Ram with bloodshot eyes, not immediately recognizing the prince's divine identity. "The bow has been passed down from Vishnu to my ancestors, and finally to me. I now offer to you, O Ram. Consider your sacred duty as a warrior to always accept a challenge, exhibiting now the strength of your arms." Parshuram held out the enormous bow. Ram, smiling slightly, stepped forward. I have heard of your tremendous feats in fighting and killing all the world's warriors 21 times. You have fully avenged your father with his commendable act. Even as a child, Ram had been told the story of Parshuram. The many kings killed by that sage had become debauched. And it was by divine arrangement that they had been annihilated. As a sage, Parshuram had performed much asceticism and finally had been personally empowered by Vishnu himself. By dint of Vishnu's own desire and power, Parshuram had been able to exterminate the warrior class. Now Vishnu, appearing as Ram, stood again before the sage. He continued to speak. You are a Brahmin sage and are therefore worthy of my worship. However, since you despise me, seeing me to belong to the warrior class, I shall now display to you my personal prowess. Ram seized the bow, along with the blazing arrow from Parshuram's hand. He strung the bow in an instant and drew the arrow back to his ear. Looking angrily at Parshuram, he asked, where shall I discharge this deadly shaft, O sage? As you are my superior, I dare not aim it at you. Hosts of gods had assembled in the sky, seeing the celestial bow drawn in anger by Ram, and fearing that he may destroy the heavens, they cried out, Vishnu, save us, save us. Ram, standing with the bow, blazing as brilliant as the sun, and Parshuram fell back in astonishment. He felt his own power completely eclipsed by Ram. Suddenly he realized Ram's identity. The sage spoke in faltering voice. You appear invincible, and I can understand that you must surely be the imperishable Vishnu himself. I accept defeat, for I am not shamed, as you are indeed the Lord of all the worlds. Parshuram recalled how Vishnu had long ago said he would come again to take back the divine energy he had given to the sage. The warrior sage folded his palms and said, O Ram, all-powerful one, you have already divested me of all my power and my pride. Please release that arrow upon my desires for heavenly pleasures and thereby burn them all to ashes. I wish only to serve you. With all my material aspirations destroyed by you, I shall be fit to become your eternal servant. That is my deepest desire. Parshuram bowed low before Ram, who then fired the fearful shaft. The sage immediately vanished along with the arrow. Then Varuna, the god of the waters, appeared, and Ram gave him the celestial bow to keep on behalf of the gods, which he got back later. We're almost done. The exchange between Ram and the sage was heard and understood only by Vashishta and a few other spiritually powerful Brahmins. The king and the others present had been wholly confounded by the events that had occurred. They were amazed and relieved to see that Ram had somehow appeased the sage. Everything again became calm, and the party resumed their journey, soon approaching Ayodhya. Whew. That's the part you like. Everything's nice again. Word had already reached Ayodhya of the approach of Dasratha's party. Thousands of Brahmins and citizens had come some miles out of the city to greet them. They stood along the wide roads, throwing rice grains and fresh green leaves in front of Dasratha. Seated aboard his chariot, the emperor and his sons waved at the people. They moved slowly through the crowd and entered the city in state. It was decorated with flags and festoons and strewn all over with flowers. Trumpet fanfares sounded, and joyous people thronged all around the king's party as it went slowly along the main thoroughfare. Dasratha entered his own white marble palace, which resembled Mount Himavat. He was greeted by his wives, who had organized a ceremonious reception for their sons and their new daughters-in-law. After the greeting, the princes and princesses went to their respective palaces and began to enjoy life in Ayodhya, exactly like the gods in heaven. After a few weeks, Dasratha asked Bharata and Shatrughna to go to the kingdom of their father-in-law Kushadhwaj, who himself had no sons. The emperor instructed the princes to assist Kushadhwaj in the affairs of state. Along with their wives, And a large army, Bharata and Shatrughna, therefore soon left the capital and went to Raja Griha, where King Kushtadhwaj lived. Now, it wasn't so quickly. They stayed in Ayodhya for some number of years. I forget the number of years, 8 years or 12 years or something like that. I think it was 12 years before this departure of Bharata and Shatrughna. And that comes from Sita's explanation to Ravana. They lived happily in Ayodhya for some time. Because you got to have Ayodhya Kanda. You got to be in Ayodhya. So I read a whole lot, and to summarize, Ram's pastimes are very... I'll say this. Similar to something we shared yesterday. Prabhupada spoke of Krishna consciousness being one of spiritual conquest, or cultural conquest. And cultural conquest could mean Bharatanatyam dancing and those kinds of things. But I don't think that's what he meant. I think what he meant was what we're doing right now, because Vedic culture was established by hearing of these ancient texts. Prabhupada said when he was young, even, that's not so long ago when he was young, whenever there was a gathering of any kind, any evening, there would always be recitation of Ramayana or Mahabharata. And by that recitation, that sound vibration creates a certain quality of heart, a cleansing of the heart, and lifting of the sense of what is virtue and righteousness and spiritual culture. Real education is development of good qualities or good culture. Prabhupada told the story that when he was a businessman, a grahasta businessman, one time he was with a friend who was interviewing potential candidates to be the manager of his office. It's a longer story, but to keep it short, he selected the second one. No, he selected the first one. The first one, Prabhupada asked him why. Because, the first one had like this really big credential. And he seemed like he spoke very well about, when he was interviewed by the owner. And the second one had less credential, and he wasn't so eloquent in his speech as the first one. So why did you select the second one? He said, he said two reasons. One reason is that the second man was very humble, and I believe I can train him. The first man was very intelligent and very proud. It's very difficult to train somebody that's very proud. And the second reason, so that's culture. The second reason is the first man didn't close the door behind him when he came in. The second man was very careful to close the door when he came in and when he left. No, culture. So a wise person wants to be engaged with people of culture. And culture has some symptoms. Of course, in Kali Yuga, where's the culture? But the culture can come simply from these activities of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Bandhanam, Dasya. The processes of bhakti can revive the dormant culture. It takes a while to polish a diamond that is covered with mud, but the diamond will sparkle. That's culture. So the primary means of the Bhagavad Dharma process is hearing and chanting of Bhagavan, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. Hearing the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra are the ideal king, but overall it's a life of virtue, and details of how virtuous persons speak to one another. Details and details. I mean, this is just a summary, but the Valmiki Ramayan is lots of details. And those devotees I know few devotees that are really deeply absorbed in Ramayana and deeply absorbed in Srimad Bhagavatam. And their cultural qualities, their personal qualities are very refined, just from that one thing. Say it the other way. If someone isn't refined, they're going to be not so interested. They're going to be interested more in money or something that's going to build their empire. And persons that have culture, they're interested in these topics, and the natural endowments of abilities that Krishna has given will come out. Just like learning to play harmonium, right? It's natural. And as you stay with those natural gifts, that it becomes a manner of, it just becomes part of your life. I'll share this one of the things that I saw Prabhupada do was every evening, as busy as he was, around 9 o'clock or so, shortly after 9, he went to the front room where he was staying in New York, and he sat with harmonium, just himself, nobody else, no accompaniments, mridanga or kartals, just singing bhajans, songs of Narottam Das Thakur. He was just lost in those devotional messages. And 15-20 minutes, and that's how he ended his day. Just his heart filled with pouring out expressions of devotion to Krishna and Krishna's devotees, etc. Cultural conquest by Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. Exactly what Prahlad Maharaj says in the Bhagavatam. So it's different versions of Ramayana, but we picked this one because the author is really good with words. He's a good writer. So let's see if there's any comments or reflections, some thoughts on anything here.
Maharaj, I just wanted to share my
Move your mask, I can hear you better. Thanks. Yeah.
I just wanted to share my experience. This is my first time hearing you like this in Ramayana. And there was an episode where you were talking about how Janaka was talking to Vishwamitra and felt so fortunate. At that time, something really shook me because I'm not like Janaka, but I felt the same way, Maharaj, that your mercy has showered on us, and just like Janaka felt, I felt the same way that saint has come here, and that was one time. And then the second time when you were talking about how Ramayana and Bhagavatam, and I felt the same thing about Parikshit Maharaj and Sukhdev Goswami. And it felt like we are experiencing that here in your presence, Maharaj. So thank you so much, Maharaj, for your mercy, causeless mercy on us, and very, very fortunate.
Thank you. The principle is Krishna makes himself, he gives his potency to his devotees. It's described in Madhurya Kandamani. Krishna is neutral, but he takes those who are his representatives. I don't know what the words are in Sanskrit, but he gives power of attorney to them. You know what power of attorney means legally. So you can give me to whoever you like. There's no conditions from Krishna's side. give me to who you like. And then the person who has that power of attorney, they have to represent Krishna properly. But then they can freely give Krishna as is appropriate. So that's the principle of descending mercy, that the one who's distributing Krishna's mercy isn't thinking that they're just acting as an instrument. But the principle is a flowing principle, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, pretty amazing. I'm just a little guy. But Krishna's mercy can, if by that power of attorney, things happen, people's hearts move, and it's amazing. It's all around amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Shikha was saying too. I do have a question.
Sure.
You were giving the example of the person interviewing it, and the qualities, the person they hired had a quality of humility and culture.
Yeah.
So what do you say for people like us living in this world? Those qualities are just deteriorating. So how do we make sure that we still develop those qualities and have those qualities, because they're just going away? In me and everybody else,
Yes.
see people around.
Yes. The symptom of the age of Kali is all good qualities become eroded. Kalir doshinid he rajan. So, nidhi, there's an ocean of bad qualities. Kalir dosha nidhi. This age of Kali is an ocean of doshas, bad qualities. And here we are. And it's hard to be not influenced. So your question, the answer to your question is sadhu sangha. The answer to the question, a really nice place. You have a Bhagavatam set in your home?
Yes.
Good. Canto 3, chapter 25, Devahuti asks the same question of Kapila. Your daughters remember who Kapila is because he's the teacher of Sankhya philosophy. That's where the Ganges went down. And so he teaches, her Devahuti's question is not exactly but quite similar, this question. It wasn't a Kali Yuga age question, but it was how to not be influenced by the temporary and affinity for the temporary and attachments to the temporary and all that goes with that. And his answer, very simply, it's expanded in the chapter, sadhu sangha. And then one has to be a little discriminating what sadhu sangha means. In sadhu sangha, I mean, somehow, certainly my faith goes to Krishna and Krishna's associates and the disciplic succession coming from Krishna through Brahma, etc., through disciplic succession. That's how the mercy flows. That's where sadhu sangha comes. And you have somehow by Krishna's arrangement come in contact with such devotees. Before coming here, Satyasara shared with me his appreciation for your family. You two girls are in his youth group, right? He's a good teacher? Yeah, probably. I have some ideas of how to perhaps get other nice association for you two. Other girls your age that are like, thoughtful, wholesome young people. So that's going to help them. That's going to help you. And then the application part is important. Applying things that you've heard that make that connection. You stay in that sadhu sangha, and with sadhus you do what sadhus do, bhajana kriya. And then, narjana vritti. This is, if you don't mind, this is a teaching from our acharyas. Everything begins with a little faith. In that little faith, Krishna sends sadhus, sadhu sangha, And then with sadhus, you do what sadhus do, bhajana kriya. And through that sadhu sangha bhajana kriya, the things in the heart that don't belong there, anarthas, unwanted things, they become cleansed. And when that's cleansed, what's wanted is left. This is the 5th time I've shared this. I just read a really nice commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur from Bhagavad Gita. The Brahmabhuta verse, are you familiar with that from Bhagavad Gita? Brahmabhuta prasanatma na sochati na kanksati samaksarveshu bhuteshu. Chapter 18, just before the concluding instructions of Krishna. So he gives this nice example. He said, imagine you have a bag of beans. It's really easy. And inside the bag of beans, there's some gold and there's some jewels. And all you have to do is remove the beans. And what's left is the gold and the jewels. So the heart is like that. There's something very precious and valuable. But there's other things in there too. And so the process of removing the other things. Mad bhaktim labhate param is how the verse ends. Labhate means attain. But he explains, attain means it's just take the beans away. And it's already there. And that what you have left is what's already there. But it's just, that's all that's remaining. That's the attaining. Mad bhaktim labhate param. The pure devotional service is what's labhate, what is attained. It's already there. Just cleansing through devotional activities and the association of sadhus. That's how. That's how.
So first is a comment by Nityananda Prabhu. Guru Maharaj, as you indicated, the piece about Janaka narrating Narada's instruction about Sita Devi's marriage is not from Valmiki Ramayan.
Yeah, that's one of the. He's a Valmiki Ramayan fan. Very. I mean, he reads it in Sanskrit. He's immersed. Next.
I think this is Amara Mataji Archana.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, how can we narrate these stories to young children 7 to 9 years age who are born here and do not know anything about Vedic teachings, such that it is relatable and they can learn something from these elevated pastimes?
I think children can appreciate the stories. I don't think you have to do much editing, or there may be versions, there probably are versions of Ram's pastimes that are in language and with nice pictures for children and all that. However, I don't know what those sources are, because it may get, like distorted, and then they hear the distorted one and think that's it, the distorted one is it. I guess it depends on who the 7 and 9-year-olds are. But I know some 7 and 9 years old. Ask your question of Atulya, because her daughters are 7 and 10, and the older one, for the last 3 years, she won't go to bed without reading Ramayana. So, have those 7, 9-year-old read with Radha, and Radha will be happy, and the 7 and 9-year-olds will be happy, and Radha will explain everything because she just loves Ramayana. That's doable, depends on the child.
I would like to take that because Vande really likes to read. She must have read 200 plus books during the COVID time. But I guess Maharaj, we just need blessings that she likes to, develops interest in reading Srimad Bhagavatam and Ramayana.
What's her age?
10.
10. Oh, sign up with Radha's reading group. There's a girl in Boston, her name is Radha, and she has a few friends, it's kind of like 5 or 6 friends, Every Saturday morning they read something. They read already Lilamrita, and now they're reading something else. I don't know exactly. I don't know what they're reading. But I know what she does personally, so you could make some arrangement to read with her. She loves to read too, like you. And because it's Ram Navami coming up, you can work something out. 200 books, huh? Okay.
This question is from Atulya Mataji.
That's the mother of Radha. Okay.
Just as we have system to study Bhagavad Gita, then Srimad Bhagavatam, then Chaitanya Charitamrita, is there a systematic study of Ramayan? Like first study Krishna Dharma Prabhu's book, then Viviti or Shubha Vilas Prabhu's, etc.
I have some concerns about Shubha Vilas's book, which I shared with Shubha Vilas. So rather than going into it, I don't recommend it, because he just embellishes with things that are not from anywhere, and without going into it. So I don't recommend that. Or, you could, I don't recommend it. So I don't. So is there a sequence to read? Why don't you ask Nityananda Pran? Depends upon the age, but your daughter Radha, she reads anything. So ask Nityananda Pran, because he can guide that question better, specifically for Ramayana, because he's a Ramayana fan, ardent lover of Ramayana. Okay. Tulya, ask him. Next.
This is from Amar Mataji again. Also, I want to understand your perspective on what is the significance of Sita Devi's picking up the bow effortlessly. What is the application here? Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
It's not really an application. She's just the goddess of fortune. She has unlimited Shakti. She's not a worldly person. That's the application. We look up to her because she's the goddess of fortune. That's it. Yeah, okay. How about you two? Anything? Thought, comment, reflection, appreciation, complaint? Okay. Okay, so we're done for the evening. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.